You don't have to like my blog, but it's the only one that's like it, as opposed to trying to make it like everybody else. And that's what we do for a living. We tell stories, not slogans, stories.
Patience is for the impatient.
Who picks average? Who picks mediocre? Nobody. We got Google, we got Facebook, we got eBay, we got Amazon. None of them spend any money on advertising.
The way you're going to get what you want or cause the change that you want to change to happen is you're going to figure out a way to get your ideas to spread.
If you can get the first 2 breaths over with, you're going to get the balloon filled up, because it's downhill from there. Just like skiing, the goal is not to get to the bottom of the hill. The goal is to have a bunch of good runs before the sun sets. The challenge that entrepreneurs have, I think, is to stop looking for someone with a rule book.
Consumers don't care about you at all. They just don't care.
He's an American author, entrepreneur, marketer, and public speaker. He's the author of 17 books. Tribes and Linchpin are his 2 best-selling books. His blog is considered to be the #1 blog in the marketing space according to Ad Age Power. He's Seth Godin, and here are his top 10 rules for success.
You know, I can tell you, I started my blog about 5 years ago. If you type Seth into Google, you'll find it. And along the way, people have said, why don't you have Twitter? Why don't you have video? Why don't you have a podcast? Why don't you have comments? Why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? And there's lots of things I could have done. And if I had done those things, I wouldn't have had the blog I have today. But by saying, this is all I'm willing to do, it's going to be just this, once a day, me and my voice, and I'm not going to pay attention to the way other people are telling me a blog is supposed to be. You don't have to like my blog, but it's the only one that's like it, as opposed to trying to make it like everybody else's.
How many people visit your blog?
More than I can count. I actually don't spend a lot of time looking at the numbers, because then I spend all my time trying to make the numbers go up. And my goal isn't to have the most popular blog. My goal is to have my blog, to be whatever I need it to be in that moment. And so I've forced myself not to study the stats. I do know Technorati says I'm the 12th most popular blog in the world, which is fine. I'll take it. And it's growing. But what I'm really focused on is, what kind of email do I get? Do I get email from people who say, yeah, I look at your blog every once in a while? Or do I get email from people who say, I've been reading it for 6 weeks and look what I changed in my life. Thank you for inspiring me to do that. And that's what gets me out of bed to do it every day. I love going to farmers markets. And if you go to the farmers market and this guy's got better strawberries than this guy because he's using less of something in it, he'll tell you the details. But no one's waiting there because this guy's got a cuter sign, because this guy's telling a story that's resonating with me. And that's what we do for a living. We tell stories, not slogans, stories. Little Red Riding Hood is a story. Once you've heard it, you're going to remember it for your whole life. And it's something that resonates in that it matches the way we want to see the world. So when we see a kid with a lemonade stand, it's different than when we see a vending machine selling lemonade, even if it's exactly the same product, because the story around it is what people are paying for. So when I meet small business people, all I ask them is not what's their balance sheet, but what's their story. Why should I pick you? Why do I care about what you're doing? And if you start giving me all this inside baseball statistics about why you're 2% better than some other competitor, I'm already glazed over, because that's not part of the way I see the world.
Patience is for the impatient. That in fact, when you're getting started and your in-laws are making faces at you and you're not sure if you're going to be able to pay the rent and you don't know why you're living in Brooklyn to begin with and you're going to have to move back to Florida, it's easy to say, you know what, I need to go faster to pick up these scraps and pick up these scraps. And sometimes what that does is it gives you the foot up to get to the next level, but sometimes what that does is it just makes you a scrap collector. And that one of the things that we see when we look at the work of people who have put really big ideas into the world, who have built online platforms, right, is that they got there by being patiently impatient or impatiently patient, whichever way you want to juxtapose it. That if you look around at the blogs you read or the people you respect online or the organizations you want to work with, the myth of the overnight success is just that, a myth. That, you know, the much vaunted Twitter was a failure, a complete failure for 2 years. Nobody used it. And if they took the mindset of, well, if it doesn't work in 2 weeks, we got to go do something else, you never would have heard of it.
Mediocrity is very common. It means being average. Average people are average. Mediocrity is for losers. The reason mediocrity is for losers is, given the choice of 5 places to eat lunch, are you going to pick the mediocre one? Given the choice of 5 people to hire, are you going to pick the mediocre one? In fact, in our Google-fueled world where you have a choice of a million things for every topic, who picks average? Who picks mediocre? Nobody. So as a salesperson, you have a big problem because there's all this pressure on you to be average, all this pressure to have a bigger kit bag, selling more items, all this pressure to call on more and more people, offering them more and more, to fit in, to wear the same clothes as every other salesperson, to show up the same way as every other salesperson, make the same pitch, and be cheaper. And guess what? Nobody wins at cheaper except for maybe Walmart. That the big win is when you refuse to settle for average or mediocre. And you say, I'm going to give up 90% of what I could do. And here's an example. If I go to yahoo.com, there's 150 links on that one page. A couple years ago, if I went to google.com, there were 3. So Google lost all the opportunities to drive people to finance, to drive people to weather, to drive people to this, to drive people to that, and instead they did one thing. And so if someone said, where should I search? Even though the searches were very similar, everyone said, go to Google, because they stood out as opposed to being in the middle. And I talked about this a little bit in Purple Cow, but this takes it further. In Purple Cow, I said, the only way to win is to be talked about, because you can't advertise your way, you can't spam your way, you can't call your way into a presence. You get there by people talk about you. But no one talks about, oh, I know this really average carpeting salesman. Never. Right? What they talk about is the barefoot carpeting salesman who doesn't wear shoes, and here's why, and let me tell you about what happened when I bought something, blah, blah, and that spreads the word. So what we grew up with was Mad Men. Mad Men was advertising and marketing with the same thing. If you spend enough money on advertising, you would succeed. But now that's over. So what we're left with is the product is the marketing. Look, we got Google, we got Facebook, we got eBay, we got Amazon. None of them spend any money on advertising. They spend all their money on making something people will talk about. So if you think about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, now they didn't make it lean on purpose, but if you ever go to Pisa, there's tons of tourists there, because if you see the Leaning Tower, you can talk about it when you go home, right? Where it doesn't matter that just 100 miles away is the Parthenon, which is one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. It's subtle. It's not easy to talk about. So the question is, are you going to build something that's as interesting as Leaning Tower of Pisa? Are you going to make a product or a service that when people are done using it, they can't help but tell their friends about?
This guy named Otto Rohwedder invented sliced bread. And he focused, like most inventors did, on the patent part and the making part. And the thing about the invention of sliced bread is this, that for the first 15 years after sliced bread was available, no one bought it, no one knew about it. It was a complete and total failure. And the reason is that until Wonder came along and figured out how to spread the idea of sliced bread, no one wanted it. That the success of sliced bread, like the success of almost everything we've been talking about at this conference, is not always about what the patent is like or what the factory is like. It's about, can you get your idea to spread or not? And I think that the way you're going to get what you want or cause the change that you want to change to happen is you're going to figure out a way to get your ideas to spread. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're running a coffee shop or you're an intellectual or you're in business or flying hot air balloons. I think that all this stuff applies to everybody regardless of what we do. That what we are living in is a century of idea diffusion. That people who can spread ideas, regardless of what those ideas are, win.
I was never good at this. And the reason I was never good at this is it turns out, if you've ever tried it, that the first couple breaths are really hard. Getting started is the opposite of the plunger. Getting started with this is really hard. But if you do the physics, after the first 2 breaths, the percentage change in latex that you're making gets smaller and smaller and smaller with each breath. And that the model is, if you can get the first 2 breaths over with, you're going to get the balloon filled up, because it's downhill from there. So the way I look at the resistance, even before I knew what it was called, is pretty straightforward. If I'm going to do the first 2 breaths, I'm going to finish it. So I'm really obsessively careful about what I decide to do the first 2 breaths about. Because I know that if I start it, then it's all downhill. I'm gone. I'm going to ship. So I thrash at the beginning. Right? At the beginning, there's lots and lots and lots of argument and discussion with the lizard brain. Lots and lots and lots of thinking and scenario planning that says, wait a minute, if I do these first 2 breaths,
If I start thinking about a cover or a thesis or whatever, I'm going to finish it. So I better decide now. The end result is you get a lot of spare time on your hands because you're not resisting. You're not delaying. You're not saying, oh, I need to see this next episode of Mad Men because there might be something useful in it for the next thing I'm going to write. You don't have that conversation because you're already over the first 2 breaths and it's all downhill from there.
There isn't just one dip, Gerhard. It's not like, let's get through that dip and we're done. Steve Jobs helped invent the personal computer, helped launch the graphical interface, helped launch the MP3 business, helped launch computer animation at Pixar. He's not done, right? The point is, just like skiing, the goal is not to get to the bottom of the hill. The goal is to have a bunch of good runs before the sun sets. And so what great salespeople do is not get through one dip and say, I'm done, I'm going to the beach. They look for the next dip because that's all life is a series of dips. That's why we're here, to go through the dips. You know, the facts are facts. In the last 25 years, the number of jobs created by the Fortune 500 is 0. Big companies don't create jobs. We know this. Big government doesn't pay attention to that because they're financed by big corporations. But what we know is that our future is being described and built by entrepreneurs. The challenge that entrepreneurs have, I think, is to stop looking for someone with a rule book. Stop looking for some franchise or how-to book or dummies guide to say, send me this money, do this, you will succeed. Because that's not where growth comes from. That's being a pawn in somebody else's game. What I'm arguing for is doing the hard work of being original and the difficult work of navigating without a map. Because if you do that, that is when you earn money and when you've created value.
Consumers don't care about you at all. They just don't care. Part of the reason is they got way more choices than they used to and way less time. And in a world where we have too many choices and too little time, the obvious thing to do is just ignore stuff. And my parable here is you're driving down the road and you see a cow and you keep driving. Because you've seen cows before. Cows are invisible. Cows are boring. Who's going to stop and pull over and say, oh, look, a cow? Nobody. But if the cow was purple, isn't that a great special effect? I could do that again if you wanted. If the cow was purple, you'd notice it for a while. I mean, if all cows are purple, then you get bored with those too. What marketers used to do is make average products for average people. That's what mass marketing is. The thing that's going to decide what gets talked about, what gets done, what gets changed, what gets purchased, what gets built is it remarkable? And remarkable is a really cool word because we think it just means neat, but it also means worth making a remark about. And that is the essence of where idea diffusion is going.
Thank you so much for watching. I made this video because Chris7820 asked me to. So if there's a famous entrepreneur that you want me to profile next, leave it in the comments below, see what I can do. I'd also love to know which of Seth Godin's top 10 rules had the biggest impact on you. Leave it in the comments and I'll join in the discussion. Thank you so much for watching. Continue to believe, and I'll see you soon.
It's really painful to be in business. You know, you've got everything at stake, you've got your reputation at stake, and it's just not working. And we fall into these traps of being impatient, of being self-absorbed, and of being selfish. We say, oh, I bought this ad, so I have the right to put it in front of you. We say, I only have 3 weeks to make my marketing campaign work. Well, if you really needed it to work in the next 3 weeks, you needed it to start 2 years ago. And we get self-absorbed. We say to ourselves, I understand my business, I'm in it every day, so I'm going to assume everyone else understands my business, as opposed to taking a step back and realizing no one owes you their attention and no one owes you their money. And so when we bring humility and generosity and clarity to the way we do business, all the mistakes go away. What you do for a living if you're a salesperson is not take orders, because they can outsource that, or put it on the web. What you do as a salesperson is not bother people into buying from you, because that's not a scalable strategy. What you do as a salesperson is you communicate emotion. But you can't communicate emotion and trust to someone if they're not listening. And the only people who are going to listen to you are the people who were pre-sold on you because someone told them about what you do and how you do it. Organizations that want to do marketing used to do marketing by interrupting people. They used to do it by yelling at people who didn't want to hear from them about stuff they didn't want to hear about. And they figured if they just yelled at enough people often enough, they'd make enough money to earn it back. Small businesses wrestled with this because small businesses don't have enough money to yell at everyone. Well, the world has changed pretty dramatically. We have discovered that people don't pay attention to ads, they skip the ads, they don't respond to the ads, they don't remember the ads. But what the internet is doing is making it easier to follow people you want to follow, to connect to people you want to connect to. So the future of marketing, it turns out, is leadership. That if you do something that people want to follow, if you connect people to people they want to be connected to, they'll join a tribe, a group of people interested in accomplishing something. And if you can lead a tribe, then the marketing will take care of itself. Small businesses have a lot of advantages here. The biggest one is they're run by human beings, whereas big businesses are often run by committees. People don't want to follow a committee. They want to follow a person. And you must be genuine and authentic in order to connect these people. And you have to care, or else they're going to tell that you're not. So some big companies can certainly do it. Individuals can certainly do it. Oprah in the United States does it all the time. A company like Apple, which is the third most valuable company in America right now, just past Walmart, does it because Steve Jobs appears to be a human being, because their products appear to be designed by people for people. When you carry around your iPhone, or I don't know where mine is, or whatever, it's a symbol to the other people in the tribe. And so this process does work. It works for big companies and for small ones. The beauty for small companies is that tribes don't have to be very big to be effective. If you have 1,000 true fans, 1,000 people who will drive across the country to see you perform, 1,000 people who will tell their friends, that's enough to make an impact.